Right, hello guys, and welcome back to my second ever build for the Edge of Fate expansion. And today we're continuing with what is actually the strongest Prismatic Hunter build of all time, and it's not even close. This build is truly insane, and I really do mean that. I promise it isn't hyperbole. I also want today's build to serve as a learning lesson for all of you watching on how to approach build crafting going forward, because a lot has changed with things like font mods being far more impactful and stats overall playing a bigger part than ever before. So take a seat and pay close attention. Anyway, in order to not waste any more of your time, let's get into it, because there is a lot to unpack and several moving parts that make this build shine, and if you enjoy this type of content, then a like and subscribe is greatly appreciated as it really helps to support the channel. So, right off the bat, this build revolves around the Hunter exotic class items, specifically with the role of Spirit of Inmost Light and Spirit of Surturachne, which isn't anything new, as I'm sure the majority of hunters watching are very familiar with this particular role, but what you may not know is that in the Edge of Fate, this combo has literally become 10 times more powerful overnight. Let me explain. Spirit of Inmost Light makes it so using any one of your abilities empowers the other two for a brief period of time that stacks up to 2 times, and at 2 stacks of the buff, your grenade and melee abilities recharge 800%/9 times faster, and your class ability recharges 50%/1.5 times faster. And previously, there was a pretty major issue with this, and that was the fact that Ascension couldn't trigger the empowered abilities buff despite fully consuming your class ability. But as of the Edge of Fate, however, this issue has been totally fixed, and Ascension now correctly triggers empowered abilities and bolsters the regen rate of both your grenade and melee as a result. On the flip side, Spirit of Surturachne makes it so using your grenade ability grants 10 seconds of woven mail, which as a reminder is a 45% damage reduction to incoming enemy fire, which on its own is nothing terribly fancy, but it's when you combine it with Spirit of Inmost Light and specifically the Gunpowder Gamble aspect that things really start to kick up a notch, because when thrown, the Gunpowder Gamble grenade is also able to trigger the woven mail from Spirit of Surturachne and the empowered abilities buff from Spirit of Inmost Light. And with just how often you're going to be getting Gunpowder Gamble with this build, the rate at which you empower your abilities is seriously going to skyrocket since it has such a low cooldown and charge time, which did get a buff by the way, but more on that later. Taking both of these class item perks and combining them with the brand new stat system, artifact perks, set bonuses, and new weapons results in a truly stellar build that is seriously unbeatable. You're going to be having infinite woven mail, rapidly charging abilities that also deal increased damage, and most importantly, an incredibly fun build that you won't want to put down. So let's get into it. Our super of choice for this build is going to be the Marksman Golden Gun, primarily because it allows you to output some solid boss damage, but also because it has great synergy with one of our fragment choices. For the rest of the basic abilities, we're taking Marksman Dodge, and I will explain why we aren't taking Gambler's Dodge, don't worry, then Threaded Spike and the Grapple Grenade. For the aspects, we of course want both Gunpowder Gamble and Ascension, not Stylish Executioner, because as you'll soon come to learn, it's basically a dead aspect and Gunpowder Gamble is so much better. To expand on this, Gunpowder Gamble got a pretty significant buff in the Edge of Fate where it now charges, with respect to weapons, from any element, not just solar. Second, the amount of self-damage has been heavily reduced. In fact, it's been reduced by 60%, meaning you can be a lot more aggressive and not have to worry about accidentally blowing yourself up. And of course, there are the numerous benefits it provides to both Spirit of Inmost Light and Spirit of Surturachne, like we discussed earlier. Ascension also received a pretty major bug fix where alongside being able to activate Spirit of Inmost Light, it can also trigger the effects of your class item mods, namely Bomber, Reaper, and Powerful Attraction, with the latter being the most impactful change. It's really quite fantastic that you can now pop your Ascension near a collection of orbs and just hoover them all up, which will come to be very important later. Fragments-wise, the first one we're taking is Facet of Hope, which is a real no-brainer pick because what it does is for simply having at least 2 elemental buffs, your class ability, aka your Ascension, recharges 60% faster. And for us, those 2 buffs are for the most part going to be Woven Mail and Amplified. After that, we're taking Facet of Protection. This is simply going to provide you with a 15% damage reduction while surrounded by 3 or more enemies. Third, we're taking Facet of Purpose. This fragment will make it so collecting an Orb of Power grants Restoration ×1 for 5 seconds because we have a Solar Super equipped. And especially because Powerful Attraction works with Ascension now, provided you have orbs around, Ascension can now act as a mini panic button if you're taking damage, which will then begin healing you. For the fourth, we have Facet of Blessing. This is going to make it so melee final blows begin health regeneration, which is just another avenue of getting some health back in a pinch. However, you could swap this for something like Facet of Courage or Solitude since it isn't that important. Finally, the last fragment we're taking is Facet of Dawn. All it's going to do is make us radiant for 4 seconds after scoring a melee hit, increasing our weapon damage by 20%, and because Threaded Spike is going to be so readily available, this fragment will be active very frequently. Now, onto the more important section, and that is your stat distribution, because for a Prismatic Hunter, it's crucial you hit several thresholds to ensure your ability spam potential is as good as it could get. So what are they? For this build in particular, and the way I've designed it, you're going to want 60 class, 110 grenade, 80 super, and around 70 to 80 melee, with the rest being poured into health and or weapons as your starting baseline. And I say baseline because in-game, these stats are actually a lot higher than what you would see here on my character, and the reason for that is artifact perks and font mods. So to skip ahead a little bit, let me explain. There is an artifact perk in column 2 called Tightly Woven, and it states that while Woven Mail is active, gain increased grenade and class stats, and in classic Bungie fashion, they don't actually tell you by how much they increase, but that's what you have me for, and the answer is 20. While you have Woven Mail, you gain plus 20 to both your grenade and class stats, which is why in the beginning I told you you only need 60 class because you get 20 from this mod, thus putting you at 80, which is almost at the 100 threshold, which by the way is the cap for the recharge rate of your class ability, aka Ascension. So where does the other 20 come from? Well, that'll be the class font mod on your class item, which provides exactly 20 class stats whenever you're holding armor charge. Similarly, the reason we want 110 grenade is because we're getting 20 points from Tightly Woven, then on our gauntlets we have a grenade font, giving another 20, putting us at 150 grenade whenever we have both Woven Mail and armor charge. And because of how often we're getting Woven Mail and armor charges with this build, the effects of both our fonts and Tightly Woven will be active all the time. Again, in the exact same fashion, this is why we also have 80 super, because we're running a super font on our helmet, putting us at 100. So if you take my distribution from earlier, in combat it actually looks like this. And by the way, having 150 grenade will increase your grenade damage by 32.5%, which does work with both grapple and gunpowder gamble. Normally with less than 100 grenade, gunpowder gamble deals 675 damage, but with 150 grenade it now deals 895, exactly 32.5% more as expected. So the armor you'll be needing for a distribution that looks like this is 1 paragon piece with a tertiary stat in grenade, 1 grenadier piece with a tertiary stat in melee, 1 gunner piece with a tertiary stat in class, and finally 1 bulwark piece with a tertiary stat in grenade. Combine all of those archetypes with the fact that an Inmost Certarachne class item is a paragon archetype with a tertiary stat in grenade, you should end up with a very similar setup to what I have. So take note and pause if you need to, this is the armor you need. Moving on to the next section, we have weapons and artifact perks, and starting with weapons, the star of the show for this build is the brand new 3rd iteration Void Exotic Scout Rifle from the reward pass, mainly because it's currently bugged right now and dealing way more damage than it's supposed to, but even when it's fixed, it's still going to be very solid, but let's talk about why it's broken first. Normally, the hipfire shot deals 118 damage, and when the target is marked using the alt fire, this gets raised to 230, which is a 95% increase. But specifically, if you equip the anti-barrier scout rifle mod, your regular damage is now 310 and your buff damage is 604, which is 2.63 times more than it should be, so definitely take advantage of this while you can. Even when it's fixed though, this weapon will still be very good for this build because it essentially acts as a pseudo-stylish executioner, because defeating either marked targets or scoring precision final blows with the alt fire makes you invisible and grants true sight, the two things that stylish executioner also does. So with this weapon, you can think of the build as having 3 aspects, at least in some capacity. Oh, and by the way, this weapon is why we're taking marksman dodge over gambler's dodge, because the amount of time it takes to fully reload this thing from empty is just far too long. So being able to instantly reload it with Ascension is quite nice and worth the sacrifice of having slightly less melee uptime. Onto the artifact perks now, you'll obviously be needing Tightly Woven in column 2 for the reasons we discussed earlier. Then also in column 2, make sure you take rapid precision rifling to make 3rd iteration feel slightly better. After that, there are minor perks you can benefit from like Elemental Benevolence and Elemental Coalescence, but the real winners are Shield Crush and Tangled Web in column 5. Shield Crush will make it so whenever you have Woven Mail, your melee recharges 25% faster and deals 25% more damage, and similarly, whenever you're amplified, your grenade recharges 25% faster and deals 25% more damage. Tangled Web makes it so whenever you create a tangle, an accompanying suspending explosion occurs, so it just helps by providing a little more crowd control to the build. The full list of artifact perks is on screen now if you want to pause and take a screenshot. As far as your armor is concerned, I recommend going with the 2-piece bonus for the Bushido set, which states that final blows with freshly drawn or reloaded weapons heal you, then the 2-piece bonus from the Last Discipline set. Final blows with primary ammo weapons grants your primary ammo weapons temporarily increased reload speed. Now onto the mods, starting with the helmet, we're taking 1 copy of Ashes to Assets, 1 super font, and Void Siphon. For the gloves, we have 1 copy of Firepower, 1 grenade font, and Focusing Strike. Chest piece is just general resist mods like always. Then for the boots, we have Stagger stacks on stacks, recuperation, and innovation. Finally, for the class item, we have 1 copy of time dilation to increase the duration of our font mods, 1 class font, and powerful attraction so that Ascension is able to collect orbs of power. For the optimal gameplay loop, you're simply going to want to spam your abilities as much as possible, and that's about it. Just remember to have your 3rd iteration equipped when casting your Ascension so you can fully reload it. And after that, continue slaying out, and by the time you reach the end of your next mag, your Ascension should have come back already because of how lightning fast your ability regen is. Like I said in the beginning, I truly believe that this build right here is the best Prismatic Hunter build ever, and I fully recommend all hunters trying the day 1 raid on Saturday to have it as their main build. It seriously won't let you down. The fashion I used in the build is on screen now if you fancy copying it, and as always, the dim link will be right down in the description for you to copy the build hassle-free. Before I go, I do want to mention that I've been streaming my grinding of the DLC on my Twitch at twitch.tv/llama2, so do come say hi if you haven't already, and definitely stop by for the day 1 raid on Saturday as my team will be racing for the world's first completion. Anyway, that's all for today. I hope you enjoyed the build, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now, dear viewer.